Would you like to have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. Just a couple of brief things. I am not a Christian. I do not go to church, but that is the closest thing to preaching and the furthest thing from a legal argument I've heard in a long time. What we have, Judge, is he can quote Justice Black. What he chooses not to do is quote all the language of Justice Black, and what he has not done is cite all the cases that have come after that talk about that the idea of a wall, that an impregnable wall between separation of church and state, in the Mercer County 2 case we'll talk about, is actually grown tiresome, that this is not the constitutional law of the United States. The idea, Judge, that public funds are being expended on this plaque or on any of the publications is a red herring, and I will steer you to, again, Judge, it's the Ohio motto case. It's ACLU versus Capital Square Review, Advisory Board 243 F3rd 289. In that case, what that case was about, Your Honor, was the expenditure. Once they passed this motto, they were expending funds to put it on public buildings. The idea is...
What was the motto?
That was the, with God all things are possible. So that was the Ohio model. So they started putting it on buildings that were expending public funds. The analysis isn't about the public funds. The analysis is about the state. So the idea that it's posted on a plaque or put in any sort of publication is really irrelevant to the...
What happens in that case in ACLU?
In that ACLU case, that the court upheld said that it is absolutely constitutional for the General Assembly to pass this motto and to expend public funds to put it on public buildings. And there's actually another case, and interestingly, in that case, they also talk about the reasonable plaintiff, Your Honor, and they talk about how the ACLU, being an organization who is out there to fight against these things, just like the American Atheists are, is not the reasonable plaintiff. That this is the HL plaintiff that the court has talked about, not that isn't the ideal plaintiff in these types of cases. So the idea of expending public funds is a red herring. There's actually also another case that just came down involving the American Atheists in the Sixth Circuit. It's a little irrelevant to this case, but it talked about was the expenditure of public funds in the city of Detroit. When Detroit got all the new stadiums that were spending public funds in order to, and Mr. Kagan can probably speak better to this than I can, but the city of Detroit decided to spend money on the facades downtown. Some of the facades were churches, and the court said that you're spending money, public funds, updating a church, that's still okay because there's a public purpose behind it. So the analysis of public funds is really irrelevant to the situation. And finally, Mr. Kagan started off by saying, if the language of the statute said that the defense of our Commonwealth depends on the Almighty Allah, then would the courts have a problem striking that down? Probably no, because that is not the history of this nation. That may be the history of other nations. But all the Supreme Court jurisprudence is that where it's a long-standing history of this nation and of this Commonwealth, that those laws will not be struck down. These laws, all this is, and Mr. Kagan is really good about picking and choosing when he wants out of the statutes and not looking at the whole statute. They're specifically referencing the General Assembly is specifically referencing statements by presidents and other of our nation's leaders that talk about referring to Almighty God in defense of this nation. That's what this is about. It's not about all the other statements that Mr. Kagan talked about, Thomas Jefferson and whatnot. We can debate that whole issue all day long. This is about the defense of this nation and the General Assembly's right to refer to it.
Yes, you can have a brief response.
Just very briefly,
We'll end it at that.
Council cites several cases that are not Supreme Court law. The Mercer case, which he spoke of, which does say what he said, and the Detroit case, which sadly does say what he said, are circuit cases. I have given you only Supreme Court law. In this case, the most recent being that I think is significant is the case of Pleasant Grove City, Utah, et al. Versus Soon, SUMMUN, February 25th, 2009. In this case, the Supreme Court held that the and this is a very interesting thing, how the Ten Commandments were a statement by the government. It was government speech. So they had previously had the Levin test, then there was the history test, was it historic, and now we essentially have the government speech test. However, even the conservative court said, although we find this to be government speech, we do not say that it's not an Establishment Clause violation. Now, therein lies the distinction. This statement by the legislature is probably closest to government speech, and yet that government speech is a violation of the Establishment Clause, not for the Sixth Circuit cases cited, which are the reason I filed in Kentucky and not in the federal courts of the Sixth Circuit. It's exactly that reason. Stone v. Graham came up through the state courts. I do not rely on the Sixth Circuit opinions that are contrary to Supreme Court holdings. No one has overruled Mr. Justice Black's statement that the First Amendment creates a wall of separation between church and state. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, Mr. Thomas, would you file the appropriate AOC form?
Judge, actually, we have already done that. We did it.
Oh, you have?
We apologize. We did it prematurely. I can file a subsequent one if you'd like.
When was it filed? Do you remember?
It's probably been 2 months, Judge.
It was a while back, we needed to get continued for various things, and the court needed Mr. Thomas to be very
Would you withdraw this one and just file a new one, so I'll at least have about 90 days to look at it?
Yeah, I apologize.
I mean, there's a lot of cases that I have to look at.
No problem.
All right. Thank you all. You all done an excellent job. I appreciate your all legal analysis. It's been very helpful to the court. Thank you. You know, I tried to trade Philip the Billy G case today.
Yeah.